Alrighty, today's video is going to be a case study on my client Thomas. Now, when Thomas started with me back in July, he had a total of 642 and a half kilos, and we got to work right away. Started, kind of chipping away at that total, and we did a meet together in early November where he was able to total 670 kilos, down a weight class as well. So we saw a 27 and a half kilo total increase. And he went from the 93 kilo weight class down to the 83 kilo weight class, as well as qualified for Powerlifting America Age Division Nationals as a junior. So this video just really covers the programming side of things, a little bit of technique, mostly just the programming, and how we have kind of taken a very long-term approach to his programming and program design, and how his training is kind of designed in a way to allow us to make a lot of long-term progress, and not just for our first meet together, not just for nationals, but for many, many years down the road, and how we are kind of pacing the progression of workload and not giving him too much right away, and kind of milking every single block for what we can. So a lot of spreadsheet stuff. It's all really in the spreadsheet, but a lot of really detailed programming heavy type content here for you. So if you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Down below is gonna be all of my information. You can find my Instagram at Rocket Strength Powerlifting and Powerlifting with Jake. Those are my two accounts. And if you're interested in inquiring for coaching, that link's going to be down below in my link tree. There should be a new client inquiry form in there as well. That's me in the video now.
No, it isn't.
It's gonna.
Alrighty, so getting right into things here. When Thomas signed up to work with me and signed on and filled out the intake form, this is kind of originally what his training was looking like. He was doing 1 time a week squatting. He was doing I say 1 to 2, but it was really like 1 day of benching and then a day of floor press. I believe it was floor press was that variation he was doing on the secondary day. And then he was doing 1 day of deadlift. So off the bat, I knew Thomas, he's an 80, well, he was competing 90. If we look at his first meet that he did, he was a 93 at 85 kilos, but he's kind of in that 80 to 90 kilo range. So he kind of fits the bill of someone who's probably going to have a frequency a little bit higher than that 1 time per week on the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. I really thought we could kind of increase all 3 of the lifts and get a lot of bang for our buck with that. So first things first on the agenda, I knew I needed to get him to 2 times a week squat. And I feel like that's a really good baseline that pretty much anyone can handle. Now, what that secondary day entails is different for everybody. But generally, and really what the primary day as well, but generally people can typically handle a frequency of 2 times a week squatting. I knew I wanted to get him to 3 times a week bench. Again, I think that's kind of the bare minimum. Unless you're like a really, really, really big guy, you're probably able to bench 3 times per week. Generally, people can tolerate that pretty easily. And then deadlift, I knew 1 time, maybe 2. My mind was kind of between the 1 to 2 times a week frequency. I thought, we could probably get away with 1, but I was also not opposed to throwing a second day in. So it was just going to kind of depend on what I wanted to do. So from a schedule standpoint, the days he gave me to train were Tuesday through Friday. He wanted Monday and Saturday off, and then Sunday was open as well. So I thought, okay, let's just start off 4 days a week. And when I'm building a microcycle, I'm just trying to build a schedule for each individual lift, and then I'm trying to kind of find a way to mesh them together. And really, squat and deadlift, we need to find a way to kind of put those together with minimal interference between them, right? And a little bit of interference from the squat to deadlift is probably okay, but we really want to allow the primary deadlift to flourish, and definitely the primary squat, but honestly the secondary squat too. We want to really be able to show up and be very, very strong. So here's what I put together. I wanted the primary squat. With him, I knew he's a perfect candidate to kind of train into meets. I knew we probably weren't going to do a whole lot of like big tapers with him. So I wanted a primary squat late in the week. Same thing with the primary bench. So those went both at the end of the week. And then it was pretty simple. We could go Wednesday or Thursday here with this squat. I decided to go Thursday with the squat. And this really the biggest reason, that secondary squat day I felt like was going to fuel his primary day. And I knew I didn't want to start it off too high stress. So that stress wasn't going to be super, super high. If I was going to have this really hard, intense secondary day, maybe I would be more inclined to want to throw it on Wednesday. But I decided, okay, I want this Thursday to kind of prime the Sunday primary session in a sense. So I put it with 2 days between to the primary day. So that's how I put the squat together. Now deadlift's the other lift, the other side of the equation here. We need to get them to mesh well. I really like to lead weeks off with a primary deadlift, especially for someone training in. Oftentimes this works out really, really well where we just pull the week of the meet. We just, instead of, this being the heavy primary, we need to get it, the Saturday or Sunday session to be the primary because that's meet day. So what I'll do is I'll just slash workload on this day some, and then really hard slash here to kind of carry us into the Saturday, Sunday, to, in a sense, kind of peak what would be the primary session on this Monday a little bit earlier. So that's kind of what I did there is I put the primary on Tuesday, and then the Friday session became the secondary. And then for bench, again, I wanted the primary late in the week. Generally, I'm going to try to do that with like most athletes. I think everyone on my roster right now has a primary session on bench at the end of the week. So either like a Friday, a Saturday, or Sunday. We want to put that around the time someone's going to be competing. So generally meets fall on Saturday or Sunday, or even national meets like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They're going to fall at the back half of the week or the tail end of the week. We need to put the primary day generally around then, and it's going to save us a lot of headaches later on, which we'll get to. I decided to, I could have put a tertiary session here, but then I would probably have wanted to put a secondary day here. So I thought, well, to keep the schedule 4 days a week, because you want to train 4 times per week, we put the secondary day on Thursday, gave us 2 days of rest, knowing this day is going to be a little bit of a higher intensity session. And then this tertiary session went up here knowing that this isn't going to be that difficult of a day. He just needs probably 1 day rest. This day is going to be pretty hard, pretty strenuous, pretty high volume, and overall workload is going to be fairly high in relation to his program. So we gave him an extra couple days of rest there. So I'm going to just go through each block, and I'm just going to show you the raw blocks. I basically grabbed these, pulled them into the spreadsheet. So I'm going to be showing the raw finished block, how it's finished, and just kind of go through all the different lifts. So I'm going to start off with squat here and kind of some of my thought process. So Thomas came to me. He had a generally pretty high bar position. So essentially a classic high bar was how he was squatting. I don't necessarily jump to change that with people right away. And the reason being is I'm trying to find predictability with block one. If you guys have watched I have a video I recorded a while back discussing intro blocks and the importance of them and how to set them up and kind of some of the thought processes we're going through. I believe that case study was done on my client Brandon. I'm generally not someone, and I believe he squats high bar, and that's something we still have yet to change, and I discussed kind of why in the video, but I'm generally not going to jump to switch someone over to like a low bar position right away because I'm looking for predictability. I'm really looking to find some sort of programming structure that's predictable, that seems to move the needle for the most part, and then we need to have something to kind of build off of and refine from there. If I give someone low bar squat, and we're going to get into this because we did eventually switch to low bar, and I'm going to show why this maybe doesn't work, and making these big technical changes early on when working with someone isn't always the best thing to do. So with the squat, we let him stay a high bar. Again, I didn't want to throw more variables at him than the programming. I just wanted to let the programming do its thing, let those adjustments kind of work themselves out and start to identify trends in training without big technique changes. So start him off. I'll pull a video of Thomas's squat so you can kind of get an idea of his leverages. So this is Thomas's squat just so you can get an idea of his leverages. And here's some high bar work. Evidently it is not letting me play it, but as he descends, you'll see he's fairly upright. He's got a very upright torso as he squats. He's very bouncy, very squatty. So with someone like that, we are going to heavily, get that out of the way there, we're going to heavily lean into generally just higher average intensities and higher reps because he's going to tolerate them well. The squat for him is a very good muscle builder. It's not going to probably beat his back up quite as much as someone maybe with like a traditional low bar, maybe someone who's a little bit longer femurs, maybe needs to hinge over a little more. So the high rep work's really going to yield a lot of benefit. So I started him off with a top double. No real rhyme or reason. Sometimes I like to start people off with like triples and then go to doubles and singles. Sometimes I like to start people off with doubles or singles, get a little closer to that, kind of 1 rep max type number so we can really see the progress that might be happening. And then we can kind of periodize from there. So generally, I'm not too worried about what the periodization is going to look like. When we start, it's more so, okay, let's find what works. Let's find what's moving the needle. And then we can periodize based on that. We can't really plan things in advance too much. without knowing what's working. So starting off with the double, gave him 6s on the back down. So he has a top double, top set of 6, and then he's got percent drop, back down 6s. That's just a 10% drop. And I gave him leg press on the primary session as well, just 2 sets. One of which wasn't too hard. I wanted to really ease into some of the overall squat workload and the quad workload because he was only squatting once a week. Secondary day, top set of 5. The intensity on this never really got too high. It only really got to an RP 7 to 8. The back downs were 7s, and those generally ran about a 10, like a 14% drop there. And then leg extensions followed that just for some direct quad work. So that was the overall kind of squat programming we were running. Again, a lot of high reps. I felt like because he was squatting once a week prior, we didn't need like a primer set on the secondary day per se. We didn't need like a single or a double or even a triple. We could probably just get away with like giving him stimulus and stimulate the quads, stimulate the legs, stimulate the main movers in the squat, and give him volume. And that's going to have his legs feeling really full and kind of poppy as we get into the primary day. His bench press, well, we'll go to deadlift. Primary deadlift started him off with the top triple. Now, we were making some technique changes here. I was kind of trying to simplify his deadlift a little bit, and you're going to see some of that in the programming here. But I was really trying to get him away from kind of a big wedge. He had a very big, aggressive wedge, and get him to a more minimalist approach. So let me see if I can find a video of that. So this is from our first session together. So this isn't the exact wedge he kind of came with me with because we were starting to work on some things here at this point. But in general, just to give you an idea of what that kind of looked like, he had this big, kind of aggressive slack pull, this very hard slack pull, and then a hard wedge, which was leading just some general issues, kind of kicking the bar out a little bit, as we see just a little bit there. But overall, I felt like he was just kind of over pulling slack and not leaving his body space to kind of get his hips a little lower and get him into a bit of a better position. What we ended up working that over to was closer to this. So here's what that ended up becoming. So you'll see it's a little bit smoother off the floor. It's a little more of a minimalist setup. He's got kind of the false slack pull here going on. But if we look past that right here, it's literally just he's in position. He kind of straight goes down to the bar, and then he just pulls, right? If we remove that false slack pull, that's, not actually generating any actual slack pull. It's just kind of him feeling the weight a little bit. So that's kind of what we were working on with the deadlift. Now, top triple here, I wanted to kind of get away from the singles intentionally here a little bit and give him some different rep ranges. Because we were making those technique changes, I knew this may not necessarily go perfect right away. So that's kind of the reason I went with that. And then we just gave him percentage 4s, basically. So these are, based on a assigned load, essentially. Hamstring curls after that. His secondary day, I did go ahead and give him the secondary day. The reason being is we were making those technique changes. So I really wanted to run him through some additional pulling on another day in the week just for more practice so that the movement pattern doesn't become stale across the week. So 2x1 here, to a given loads. This is just 74%. We went 76 week 2, 78 week 3, 80% week 4. And then we followed up with RDL. I wanted to go RDL because if you see a side angle of Thomas's deadlift, which I will show here, he's very hingy. I shouldn't say hingy. He has good deadlift leverages, but he's very much, his pelvis positioning is very much into like a true neutral or even like an anterior tilt in a sense. He's just got a very flat low back when he pulls, and there's a lot of hamstring and glute activation kind of going on. Those muscles are being made movers more so than I would argue potentially the quads and adductors, which you'll see a lot in the sumo deadlift. So I wanted to give him direct RDL work. I felt like if we could get his RDL stronger and improve his hinge, or at least just give him some stimulus on that second day, it was going to make a big difference in how his deadlift really moved. And then his bench press, top triple here, I started him off away from the singles in this case, and then I gave him 4s on the back downs. So he had a top set of 4 after the top triple, and then back down 4s. Those are a 10% drop. Went with weighted dips. He's got a very long range of motion. I felt like the shoulder positioning he's kind of getting in the bench press is very similar to the shoulder positioning he's getting in the weighted dip. So I thought this is going to be perfect for us. I did not give him a ton of intensity to start these. I kind of eased into it because I don't believe he had ever really done this exercise before. This exercise can be kind of unforgiving if you just throw someone to the wolves with it right away. After that, tricep extensions. Secondary day was top single. Knowing this was 2 days away from the primary, I gave him the top single. And this was kind of the primer set in a sense to kind of have him feeling like he was prepared to handle intensity when we got into the primary day. And then I give him easy fours. Again, he was only benching once or twice a week. We don't need to push him that hard. Like a little bit is going to go a long way. And that was kind of the thought process with that. So that was the idea. And I just let him run with like kind of minimalist workload here in terms of the average intensity. The volume is not necessarily minimalist, but the average intensity was. And then machine chest press after that, just a couple easy sets. Well, pushing the intensity, but a couple sets there. And then the secondary day was very simple. 2x4 doing assigned load, ascending sets, comp bench, very straightforward. This day, I just need to give him a touch. He just needed to touch bench press. He did not need a ton of stimulus. This did not need to be very grueling or difficult. It only ever got to an RP 6.5. How I program percentage-based work, just as a side, is I basically program the RPE relation percentage load. So like a set of 4 at 6.5 is generally about 79.9%. So that's why I programmed it at, and I write 6.5 so I know, okay, this is supposed to be about a 6.5. So that's how I write that. But that's why you'll see like at 5 minus 10, at 5. At 6 minus 8, that sort of thing. So these back down sets were a little bit more in terms of percentage than, like I guess these would be planned on. So that was his structure overall. We did have some back work and bodybuilding type stuff in there. Obviously, as more muscle is going to yield a stronger athlete. We always want to focus on building muscle year round. So that was the game plan, block 1. Block 1 went really well. I believe we finished with PRs across all 3 lifts. Now, if we look at his macro cycle in total, because I do have this planned out, this is every big tops that he's ever done in terms of loading. So we can see top double here. These are the weights he took on that. The primary 5s. I didn't fill in the 6s, but primary 3s. And then I guess I didn't fill in the deadlift either. But that was kind of the first block. And you'll see, as soon as we got through block 1, I said, all right, let's plan how this is going to go. I believe it was after block 1, he had decided, hey, I want to do this meet, which was the Granite State Grand Prix, to qualify for junior nationals. So that was kind of the game plan there. As we got into block 2, it was kind of a situation where, okay, let's write block 2, do block 2. We'll have a little washout week, which I'll kind of cover what we did, but I believe it was just like a deload type thing just to keep him sharp because he was on vacation for the back half of this week anyways. And then from there, we got into our prep, which was essentially 2 blocks. So block 2 was not a lot different. I didn't change a lot. Everything went really well. And in general, all I did was kind of periodize some sets down. So we went to doubles on deadlift. This top set of squat set went to 4s rather than 5s. The RDLs became 6s. The squat was a double. We ran the double back, and then the bench was a double. And I wanted to try to get everything start to line up a little bit, so we were doing doubles on all 3 lifts at the same time. That was kind of intentional now. That's why I ran the doubles back here, because, okay, he wants to do a meet. Let's run the doubles here, knowing we're going to get 2 blocks of singles to kind of ramp up for. So block 2 went very well as well. I'm just going to kind of gloss over it, but we ended up working up to 500 for 2 on squat, which was 20 pounds more than the 480 for 2. 420 for the top set of 6, 445 for the top set of 4, 340 for the top double on bench, 310 for the top set of 4, 345 for the single, 530 for the top double on deadlift, and then 365 for the RDL. Now you're going to see where I start to really play with the progression of workload in progress. Like I'm really pacing the progress following this block. This block was really the block for us where we really started to establish the baseline, and you'll see I start to play with the rate that I'm allowing him to progress following this block. So we get into our kind of first prep block. In reality, we're always kind of prepping for powerlifting. I mean, I'm not really changing a whole lot as we get closer to a meet. Some of the top sets might periodize closer to some lower rep stuff, but generally that's about it. A lot of the back downs you're going to see are going to stay put. So bench or deadlift, we went to singles. So looking at what we ended up pulling, knowing he pulled 530 the previous block, I felt like, okay, he's probably good for 560-ish range, and that'll probably set us up nicely for meet day. Knowing this week was going to be his biggest lifts of prep, but I also want to hold on to momentum. I'm not trying to necessarily empty the tank per se. So what I did was I let him work up to the 560 and then worked backwards and tried to manage how aggressive the loading was going. So like 530 for 1 at 8, or for 2 at 8 rather, should be about 530 for 1 at 7, which is what this RP was. So that's kind of where I established that, and then I worked backwards from there. For his squat, we ended up going back to 5s because I wanted to head into 4s for the remainder of meet prep. So we ran 4s for the back half of meet prep, 5s for the first half. It went very well in our first 2 blocks, so let's rinse and repeat there. So wrong block, back to 5s there. And then the primary day was a single, and we really worked up towards 535, which he did miss, actually. He missed that. I think he was having a poor night of sleep and some weird nutrition going in. Just variables weren't on our side. So he missed this set. This was actually a miss. But otherwise, this block was overall a good block. And squat went well, too. There's just a weird session there that kind of caused a miss. But overall, it was a good block. I believe he hit the bench. Yes, he did hit the bench. So that's where we ended there. Now, you'll see as we get into the second block of prep, I'm really playing with the progression. So I'm going to go through each lift individually here because, again, not a ton of changes, especially in the final block of prep. We're going to do what we know works, and that's what we did. So started off with singles on deadlift, and you'll see the pacing here. We went 485 week 1. That's what we did the previous week 1. I went 510 week 2, just gave him an extra 5 pounds. 535 week 3, gave him an extra 5 pounds. And that was the final heavy single of prep. Because at this point, this 570 was meet day. Because when we train in, what the schedule looks like, this is the 4-week out block. We run week 1, week 2, week 3, pretty much how we normally would run a week, a 4-week block. And then this week is just modified to get, he was competing on a Sunday, so to get Sunday to feel strong. So how I structured this then was set him up with the 535, and then it was just a little bit of a taper, and very minimal taper. So you'll see loading is basically what like a week 2 would be, but I slashed his set out, so he just did 2 sets as opposed to 3. And then I also got rid of a rep, so the intensity was pretty low at this point. This was more like kind of week 1 levels of intensity. And then the single, though, I let him push a little bit. Because at this point we were still a good ways out, I did let him push that session just a little bit. So he pushed that up to an RP7, 545. And then that secondary day was just the 2x1 was pulled really hard. He was competing on Sunday, so we pulled this session back very, very, very hard. And it was just 2x1 at 405, and that was it. With his squat, this is when training in works really, really well. Because his primary falls on a Sunday, we could literally just do a regular 4-week block straight to the meet. We changed very, very little. So you'll see like the primary squat, we went, go back to the macro cycle view here. We went 460, 5 pounds over week 1 here, 485, so 5 pounds over week 2, 510, 5 pounds over week 3, and then that set us up for meet day. And if you see the progression here, 460, 485, 510, this was meet day. So that was the pace. We just ran it like a normal block. Normally, he would have not competed on this day. He just would have went to the gym and did his primary bench and squat. But we lined everything up with meet day, so we didn't really need to taper him. So if we look at the secondary day, 1x4, 2x7 across the first 3 weeks. And then the final week, it's a 1x4, 2x6. That's all it is. The percent drop's the same. I let him actually push the loading more so than he did on week 3 to week 4. And then we just did the normal drop we would do to go to 7s, but we slashed a rep to just kind of taper some of the intensity out. And then the leg extension intensity just came down. That was the extent of the taper. Basically, he skipped the last rep on his 2 back down sets of squat, and he just sandbagged the leg extensions essentially, and that's all we did. And then for bench press, same deal. Very little taper. 4s were the same. These singles across the block, the same. I changed nothing. You'll see machine chest press starts to come down a little bit, and then this is our regular progression. And if we look at the progression for this primary session across the block here, we went 460. Oh, wrong lift. 325, so 5 pounds more than we did week 1 of the previous block. 340, 5 pounds more. 355, 5 pounds more, and that set us up for meet day. And again, very minimal on the taper. There's really no taper on the bench press aside from like him sandbagging a couple sets of machine chest press. And that was all we did. Pulled out some of the bodybuilding work, and he was ready to go. So I will just briefly gloss over meet day. We ended up finishing 9 for 9. We went 242 on squat. That was a 10 kilo meet PR. And if we look at his attempt sheet here, this is my attempt sheet I have athletes use. We went 242, our planned third. The second was a little slow. So shout out Garrett, his handler, and currently his nutrition coach as well. Decided to put in 242. It was the right call because I think they went 232 on the second and 235 on the second. So they pushed the second. We decided to play the third safe just because the 235 was a little hard, and he actually blew it up. He was probably good for 245. So just kind of a weird hiccup on the second to kind of did cause them to play it conservative, but it was the right call and moved well. Had a little bit of room in the tank. And if we look back at what he missed, if you remember, he missed that squat. He missed 242.6. He missed what was it? In pounds. He missed 535, which is 242.6. So peaked very well. He moved this. I'll see if I can find a video quick. Here was the second attempt. And yeah, it did really move well. He had 2 for sure, probably closer to 5. Maybe a little more, but probably 5. I would have probably been comfortable loading. So that's where we finished squat. And again, he missed that previously, about a block out. So he did peak very, very nicely. Bench press, his best bench prep was 165. His meet best previously was 160. And we ended up working up to 167. So we hit the high end on bench. And bench went very, very well. I will pull a video of that up. All right, so here's that bench press here. Perfect call. Peaked really well, obviously, like I mentioned, and this emptied the tank. This moved very, very well. So that was that third attempt bench press there. Anytime we can ever kind of exceed what we do in the gym on bench press is a huge, huge, huge win, just because of kind of the variables bench is given in meets. We have judges' commands. You're not moving at your own pace, obviously, because of those judges. Pause durations can be different than training potentially. So anytime we can really, do what we do, and bench is also affected most by like comp equipment, like equipment changes, right? Because the pad's different, the rack's different versus squat, and especially that really makes minimal difference. So anytime we can do more in a meet on bench press than we do in the gym, huge win. We will always take that. And then for deadlift, peaked super well. Ended up pulling 260. His best pull in prep was 254. And let me see, I believe this is the video. So here's that video of his deadlift. Little bobble, but otherwise moved well. And he was able to get white lights for that. So that was his meet. Went very well. Post meet, then the game plan was, okay, let's kind of start to transition over to low bar. We also decided, he kind of mentioned bringing his bench grip width out a little bit. I wasn't as, wasn't as concerned with that change, but it was a change that did make sense on paper because he does have did have a very narrow grip. So those are the changes we made. Post meet, we needed to get him squatting low bar, like I mentioned, and get that grip width change. So here's how I structured it. Starting with squat, I wanted to keep the 2 times a week frequency, of course. So what I did is I wanted to have him low barring twice per week, but I couldn't just give him all low bar. That would destroy his shoulders, more than likely his arms, biceps. A lot of times you give someone low bar when they're squatting high bar, you can really run into some problems. And we actually did run into some problems. And I discussed them beforehand and said, hey, there's a good chance you're going to run into some shoulder discomfort, some bicep discomfort, wrist, forearm discomfort. There's a lot going on in the low bar position, a lot more stressors placed on the upper body. So I wanted the 2 times a week frequency, but I just wanted to leave it at just 2 sets. So top set on the primary was low bar. Top set on the secondary day was low bar. Everything else was high bar. From there, kept the leg press, kept the leg extension. And then, that first block, we did start to run into some problems. We started to run into some shoulder pain. Nothing major, but just a little bit of discomfort, which did bleed into bench press just a little bit as well. For Tuesday, or his secondary bench, or tertiary bench day rather, with the we started transitioning to the wider grip. I wanted to leave his regular grip in here in the program, so I gave him an extra set too, just because I want to start to increase some volume a little bit, because we were on a very minimalist approach with his 3 days a week. His Thursday, secondary session, top triple was wide grip. So this is our new wide grip. We moved the pinkies out, or the grip out like 2 finger widths, I think, 2 to 3, and then kind of left it at that to kind of play around with. And this set, as well as these 2 sets, or these 4 sets rather, kind of became a let's play around with the grip and see what feels good, and then let's keep these constant and let's keep these constant. So we ended up playing around with some of that, started to catch a little momentum on bench, but honestly, bench was kind of fizzling throughout the block. That was mostly due to the shoulder discomfort from the squatting. So I wasn't too worried about that. It was more so, let's just make sure we're squatting and deadlifting with kind of efficiency. And then if the bench lags behind for a block or two, it's not that big of a deal, as we're just getting comfortable with the new grip anyways. And this deadlift, there was nothing different happening here. We knew from a pacing standpoint, the plan was to do junior nationals, which is all the way out here. So we knew we had kind of 2 blocks to kill here. So really 3 blocks to kill. So this is kind of our developmental period where we're really working on those things so we can kind of be at a spot where we can run 4 blocks straight into the meet. So first block went well. You'll see he ended up hitting 510 for a double on deadlift, which is, and again, if we go back to the pacing, it's just 10 pounds more than his best ever double. 425, so I went plus 10 pounds there. 445 to 460, so plus 15. 470 to 480, plus 10. 500 to 510, plus 10. So you'll see, this is when I'm really starting to control progression. I could unleash him. I could probably, take the leash off and let him do what he wants and let him really load things up to the RPEs. But that may not lead to the best long-term sustainable training. So if we can really find a way to pace progression, that's going to allow us to kind of have that sustainable training all the way, because I knew I need to string all this momentum along all the way till nationals for the most part. That was for the squat, rather. I was discussing squat numbers. So yeah, that was for the squat. But going back to deadlift, 445 or 55 rather, we just start plus 15 pounds on this double. 475 to 490, plus 15 pounds, 495 to 515. So this is plus 20. We start to really push the loading on the deadlift. 530 to 545. So just plus 15. Again, he could probably have doubled more, but there's kind of not a huge point, right? If we look at then bench press was kind of fizzling some, but the game plan was try to work him back up to 370, 320 for 4s, 335 on this secondary day for 3s. So we did move away from the 2 count single because I wanted to give him a little bit more volume on this day with that wider grip. So he did get to run a triple here. That was another change we made. Block 6, again, really starting to look at pace of progression here and not necessarily emptying the tank, especially on the squat. So we look at where he was this next block here. So that was this block, 540 for 1. That is just 10 pounds more than 5 pounds more than his best ever squat in the gym, okay, which he missed. So he did miss that, but 540 for 1, his best squat to meet was that 535 set, 534 or something, 534.6. So that's what we went with there, is just to chip that 515. So if we look at his last time we did singles, we went 510, so it's plus 5 pounds, 495, so plus 10 there. 470 to 460, so plus 10 there. So only plus 5 to 10 pounds, depending on the week, from the last time we did singles, which was a full 2 months prior. So that was the plan on the squat for this block. This block, we really started to kind of nail it with bench press as well. So we really committed to, because we were kind of wishy-washy with the grip, we really committed to, okay, we're going to run the old grip on this day for sure. We're going to run the new grip on this day and the new grip on this day. And again, the idea behind that was, okay, let's find some equilibrium and let's find some consistency with how you're feeling on bench press, due to the fact that sometimes with the wider grip, things feel a little inconsistent. Let's just have a day that gives us easy, smooth bench press work that we don't have to think about. We don't have to cue anything. We can just do it because this is how you've been benching for years. Then on this day, we can work on those changes. This day, it's kind of the heavier session that sets up, the high stress session here. So that was kind of the idea there. We really caught momentum here. So we ended the block with a 580 deadlift, which was 585 rather, all-time PR deadlift. And again, if we look back at the last time we were hitting singles, we worked up to 570. So it's only plus 15 pounds, right? You're not going to see these plus 30, 40 pound PRs. And I was kind of, the deadlift has been the one lift where I have kind of let him loose a little bit. But if we look at the squat, 540 up to 535, like the pace of progression is really, we're trying to string it along as we can. Bench press, we ended up working up to 365 at 10, so around his best now with that kind of wider grip, not far off, and like around his best in the gym with that grip. So from there, now we know we have three. This is kind of going into future plans because we're in this block currently because today is the 18th. So he's at the end of his week 1 of this block. We have a little 3-week block where we need to kind of kill some time. And then we have 4 weeks to kind of build into nationals. So with this, we are kind of letting him loose a little bit. This is kind of a good time to do it, knowing that we have time to kind of pick up the pieces following this block and kind of catch some momentum, knowing we're probably going to run triples, doubles, and then singles for the final 2 blocks on the squat. So I'm letting him work up to 555 as kind of our goal weight here. For bench press, I'd like to just have him press like a smooth 370 and kind of match, that all-time PR and kind of get us back into that range with that wider grip. And then for his second primary deadlift day, really looking to have him work towards PR beyond what he did last block, right? Last block was an all-time PR, a substantial one at that. And I think there's another 10 or so pounds of room. So we're kind of working towards that 595 goal number. So just wanted to make this video, kind of discuss some of the stuff that goes into kind of planning long-term with athletes and discuss how we've able to kind of get Thomas from, a total that was 642 to 670 in a fairly short amount of time while losing body weight. So let me know if you enjoyed this video. And if you want more case study type videos, I have plenty of ones I've kind of schemed up and thought about how I would put them together. So if you enjoy, leave a like, comment, subscribe. My Instagram info is going to be in the description below, as well as my information to inquire about coaching is going to be down below. So with that, have a good rest of your day and appreciate the watch.